Good evening. My name is Arlene Miller, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this edition of Our Town. This is the second segment of two segments where we're focusing on the election, the local election in Longmeadow, which is going to be on June 9th. It's an important election because several positions and key positions are being decided. That is, positions on the select board and positions on the school committee, as well as the moderator. The moderator position is not contested, but there is a contest in both the select board position and the school committee position. On this segment of Our Town, we're focusing on the school committee candidates. There are 3 candidates vying for 2 seats on the school committee, and they're 3-year terms. So it's my goal to introduce each of the candidates to you, the voters, in the hopes that, number 1, you'll vote, and number 2, that you'll be an informed voter, so you have a better idea about the candidates, the people you might elect who will be making decisions about how your tax dollars are going to be spent. Today, my guest is Russell Duperret, who's new to the political scene in Longmeadow.
Correct.
But a candidate for the school committee. Welcome.
Hello.
And thank you for coming. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
So being that you're new, I don't know much about you that I can pick on, but tell us a little bit about yourself and why you would like this position.
Okay, so I moved back to town about a year ago, a little less than a year ago.
Back to town?
Yes. So I lived on Pinewood Drive for 6 years.
Okay.
Actually, right down the street from one of the other candidates, Michelle Krasagrodsky, which is how I got to know her. So I've lived here about a total of 7 years. I went to law school over at Wennick. So I lived at Georgetown Condos for 3 years before that. So I've been in the area.
Sort of Longmeadow.
Yeah. If you live at Georgetown Condos, you pretty much live in Longmeadow.
Some of it is in Longmeadow.
Yeah. I was not, though. I was actually on the Dickinson side. So I have 3 little girls, 2 that are going to Blueberry Hill now, and the third one's 3 years old, so she'll be going soon. And I'm an education attorney. So I represent, well, my firm represents about 60 to 70 schools throughout the state.
What does an education attorney do?
We basically cover all the legal issues that a school could have. So student discipline issues, teacher contract negotiations, special ed, general counsel work, which would be open meeting law issues, pretty much everything.
I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yeah, it's not really a, so the way most firms work, it's just part of their firm. We really almost exclusively just do that, which is how we can cover so many. It's only my father and I and my brother in the firm. But we really just focus on that. We have a few cities and towns we work with, but it's mainly schools. So the combination of those 2 things is really how I ended up becoming interested in it, because I'm usually advising school committees, but I never actually get to make decisions. I just watch what they do. So here, I don't represent Longmeadow in any fashion, and my kids are going to school here, and it's kind of what I know. So I do, you know, volunteering for things is something that volunteering for your community is something I'm interested in doing. But if I'm going to do that, you know, the Board of Selectmen, I do represent some cities and towns, but in a limited fashion. So it's just not something I really know a lot about, whereas schools, I know a lot about schools. So I figured to volunteer, you should volunteer for something that you know.
Well, this isn't a volunteer. This is an elected position.
Yes.
It's a step up from volunteering.
Yes, well.
It's a big job.
Yes, it is.
And you would be dealing with, I'm going to say about 60% of the budget, and that doesn't include benefits. So it's more like 75% of the town's budget is used for school-related issues. So it's a big deal.
It is.
It's a big deal in town. So what do you, I understand you've got some passion behind the school situation, but what would do you have an agenda, or are you, any particular issue you're concerned with?
I think ultimately any school I look at, there's always things you can improve, and then there's always things that you do very well. And so when I look throughout the state, I kind of see some schools that really do things, you know, one thing really well, and then another thing they can improve on. And so what I was thinking is the perspective I have, maybe I could look at some of those things and improve in the areas that I think we could improve on.
But you don't have a list?
Well, I do.
Sort of.
There are some particular things. I mean, I think, and this isn't meant to be a criticism, it's really just an area where you can improve. And I think one area we can improve in is the way we communicate between school committee administration and parents. I think that some of the process that's been used lately could have been better. I think if we were a little bit more open about things, then I think people might understand the rationale behind why certain decisions are made. So the example that's kind of come up in the press is the redistricting.
Sound like you're speaking like as a parent.
Issues,
Yeah.
but I wasn't in the affected area. So I really, before all that started to happen, I've been going to PTO meetings, and I went to a superintendent, her forum. So I've been going to those things anyway, and they had mentioned there was a couple seats open. And so I decided that I spoke with Michelle actually, because I knew she was on the committee, and I asked her some questions about it and what it might be like. And so I decided to get involved, and then when I got involved, I started going to the redistricting meetings. It wasn't really I'm not directly affected, so I know most of the area of town didn't go to those meetings because they weren't directly affected.
Right.
But once I was there and I realized how it all happened, I just think that maybe if we'd done it a little differently,
You mean the approach or the actual design?
I think the approach. The plan at the end of the day, when I looked through all the different plans, I think that plan is a reasonable plan. It's just the way it got laid out, and the superintendent, to her credit, I mean, she said, I think maybe in hindsight it could have looked a little different, and so I respect that. But there's a number of things like that I think we could have a little bit different dialogue.
Okay. So what do you think the relationship should be between the school committee and the superintendent?
Ultimately, the superintendent is really, she's the one running the school. I mean, the school committee shouldn't really be involved in day-to-day operations or trying to, micromanage the school system. But the larger decisions like, the policy decisions, the budget, deciding whether to redistrict, those type of things, really the committee, in my opinion, should be weighing in that. And they actually should be doing it in a very, I think there needs to be more dialogue up front before decisions start to be run with. And so if you had that discussion up front and the public's aware of it, then you'd have a better.
Well, they have a gazillion subcommittees, the school committee.
Yes.
They must have had a redistricting subcommittee.
They had an enrollment committee, is my understanding. And I think that enrollment committee met in October. There were 3 members.
You're asking me a question. I have no idea.
Yes, it did meet in October, and there was 3 people on the enrollment committee. I'm not sure what happened from October to February, but I know the next thing was the budget had redistricting in it, and then there was a letter to parents about it.
But the children will survive.
Yes.
And now I read that there's another issue of redistricting with the middle schools. Is that going to be handled differently
that came up
now?
in a committee meeting.
Just recently?
I think it is going to be handled differently from what the superintendent has said in some of the articles in the paper, which is good. I mean, that's really was my concern all along. It never was. To me, there are a lot of kids in Blueberry Hill, and there weren't as many in Center. So I can understand why that conversation happened.
And class size is important, right? I mean, we always hear that class size is important.
Class size is important. It's also, and I think Principal Pratt's done a good job of kind of outlining why it's an issue over there. It's not really just class size. It's also special needs, children, and the spaces available to them. I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues that needed to be addressed. And probably, if we had a better long-term plan, might have been addressed a few years ago, probably. But those are, for me, it's all about planning and making sure people know what we're doing. Those 2 things are important. It's the decision itself sometimes is not even as important as what we actually did to get there.
So you're a process person?
It's process and making sure that everybody can understand what we did, trust what we did. They may not like it. I mean, I think the people in the Plan A area, ultimately, we still would have had discord no matter what happened here. But I think if we had a better way to explain it to them before you get the letter in the mail saying, oh, by the way, your kids might be moved, that would have been probably a better way to handle it, but that's already been admitted. I mean, there's no, you know.
Right. Okay, so we have a lot of issues that the schools are going to be facing going forward in the next 3 years. I imagine the middle schools will be high on the agenda. Do you have a feel for what's your sense of that issue?
Yeah, the middle schools, it's a tough issue because we just did the high school. We're a wealthy town. The state, they don't give out, the MSBA is just not throwing money around the way they used to. So the chances of Longmeadow getting more money from MSBA anytime soon probably isn't great. But we do have an issue because we have 2 middle schools that really need some work.
But you say we're a wealthy town, and you're only saying that because we get less money than some of the not wealthy towns. Is that what you mean? We
get less money from some, but also, I mean, I represent some very poor areas and some very wealthy areas. And the poor areas, when I go into some of their buildings, really are in tough shape.
Oh, so they need more money, that's what you're.
And so they need more money, and I think realistically, just from a common sense perspective, I don't know MSBA is going to, you know, if they give Longmeadow money to do their high school and they go back and give them money to do their middle school, when some poorer city has put in requests over time, the likelihood of you getting another one before some other place gets it.
Well, it'll take time. It took time for the high school.
Yeah.
But that aside, I know in the capital plan there's some money. This year we just approved some money at the town meeting to do improvements in one of the middle schools, or both, boilers or whatever it was. I can't even remember what it was, but there was some significant issues, and I sort of said, well, whoa, what's that about? Yeah. But obviously, even if we were to decide today, you're going to do 2 middle schools or combine a middle school or whatever you're going to do, it's going to take 5 years, I'm being conservative, I think, before that building is built.
I'd agree
Correct?
with that,
Yeah.
yes. And I think, I mean, for my children, they'll probably be past middle school before this happens. I mean, that's the sad reality of it. But one thing what I really would like to see is what is the school's long-term plan for building projects and what is the Board of Selectmen's long-term plan? Because what I hear is kind of, there's some passing in the wind where, well, we need to do a senior center, we need to do the DPW, we need to do the middle school. What would be good if we had a conversation, maybe a joint meeting where we talk about those things and say, what is your plan, what's our plan? It may not line up, and I've had some conversations with the Board of Selectmen members about this, but I'd like to know what they're thinking, and I think they need to know what the school's thinking.
Right, and then you have to decide how to compromise and make a plan. Who's going to go first?
Yes.
Because they're not all going to go together.
That's right.
And the fact of the matter is, the schools are more sexy than DPW or the senior center. Senior centers, in that order, it would be schools, senior center, DPW, which has happened over the years. Just disappears from the radar.
I think that's very true.
Yeah, but that's going to take some leadership, and so are you prepared to step, and probably not pleasant meetings, step up to the plate on that?
I would. I mean, so I represent a lot of schools. The other thing I do, probably about 10% of the practice, is represent cities and towns for labor relations. In a lot of places, I represent both sides. So I do see both sides of things. I mean, I see what the mayor may say on one thing, or town administrator, and then I see what the school committee is saying. And the school committee has a lot of sway because they do represent the largest part of the budget. And people really, when you say, do you support the schools? The answer is almost always yes. Do you support DPW? Well, you need DPW, but you don't get the same type of public outcry.
Well, we don't want to build a nice building for them, but we support, yeah, that's right. We want them to plow our roads, we want the water to work and the sewer system to work, but we don't want to give them any money.
Yeah, and that's not the way, you can't run a town long-term that way. It just isn't effective for the town. You need to do, there's towns in this area that have done a great job of long-term planning. They have new buildings, but they've done it strategically so that their tax rate stays similar throughout the time. I mean, you can't have a high school and a middle school at the same time. I mean, you can, but it's difficult from a tax perspective. So, you know, I need to know more about the single building option too, and that's something I did comment on, but it's not so much I didn't understand the SOIs. It's more about, I wasn't totally clear, are we looking for one? I mean, you know, the superintendent, I think a couple of committee members mentioned it, but I didn't really know what the whole committee wanted to do.
And the selectmen voted it down, I think partially because of what you're just saying, because it wasn't clear what the plan was. Okay, so talk to me for a few minutes about your concept of budget. In my history working with school committees, some school committees just think, well, we should always ask for far more than what we want because there'll be a little bit battle, and if we really want it, we'll go to the town meeting floor and we'll get it, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And we'll just, keep taking from free cash, we'll just keep taking from reserves. What's your sense of that, how the school committee budget fits into the town budget?
Yeah, I'm a very direct and open person. So, and I negotiate with unions, so my strategy in really anything in life is I like to just tell you what I want.
So what do you want?
Up front. And so in this situation with the budget, I think the schools needs to get what's fair from a percentage basis. So if the DPW gets a certain percentage, the school gets a certain percentage, it should never be that one of those parties is getting something dramatically different than everybody else. You have to take into account both the town and the school. And that's why I think it's important to have more dialogue with the board, really. But at the end of the day, the schools are very important in Long Meadow. It's the reason we came back. It's the reason we moved here the first time around. It's the reason our property values look different. So it is very important, and I would try to get what I can get for the schools, but I wouldn't want to do it in a way where it means that somebody else, the police department, fire department, you can't do it in a way where we get everything and you get nothing.
I think typically the way, now we have a town manager under the charter, and it's his budget. I think he does a percentage. He says, this is your piece of the pie, this is their piece of the pie, this is the police piece of the pie. You do, you decide within that limitation what you can do. So are you comfortable with that, or?
Sometimes
and
that
how
works.
does full-day kindergarten fill into that picture?
Well, and that's a good example, but sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the needs of each group on a particular year. So sometimes I see towns that say, well, this year, even though we usually give everybody 2, DPW is getting 3 because of this issue, whatever the issue might be. So you can't be totally inflexible where it's just these are the percentages and that's it. Kindergarten is something where what I'd really like to see is a budget from administration that shows kindergarten the way we have it now with the fee and kindergarten without the fee. And what's the difference? What are we cutting to make that happen, or what do we need to ask the town for to make it happen?
Right.
But until you see it black and white, it's hard to answer. I had that question a lot at Long Meadow Days, and that's what I said to people. It's tough to answer without knowing what do I have to cut to get it.
Right. Are you willing to?
Or do I have to cut?
Are
to
you
get
willing
it?
to cut to get it? Well, they've indicated you need to, but I don't know what the particulars are either.
Well, it's probably a question of how much do you cut and how much do you ask for. That's the reality with kindergarten. And then the question is, if you got to cut, what are you cutting? Some things you may not want to cut for kindergarten, and some things you would.
Right.
And so it's really a balancing act, but until you see the budgets black and white in front of you, and I would want a few meetings on this.
Is it the trend?
There is.
Is it important?
It is important, and when you look at good schools throughout the state, a lot of them have free kindergarten. When you look at studies, one of the most important things for kids is to have schooling earlier. It is important.
All of these kids probably go to some sort of schooling earlier.
Well, that's one of the differences here too. You have tutoring after school, and you have all these extras. It helps. That's why our kids do so well here.
Yeah. We can't complain about that. It's great.
No.
So what other deficiencies or improvements would you offer to this particular board? And do you think your personality fits among the 7 in terms of a cohesive unit?
Yeah, I guess in looking at this, I don't think there's really deficiencies. I think they're doing a good job. They're all spending a lot of time on our school. The reality is, to be on a school committee, you're spending a large portion of your life on the schools. So I commend all of them.
And the salary is huge.
Yes. And I commend all of them for that. Honestly, I say that to my clients all the time. You're doing something that a lot of people wouldn't be willing to do. So I don't know that other than, a lot of the process, I think really could be better. But other than that, I think they're doing a good job. They seem to be reasonable. They seem to look at things carefully. I just like to have more conversation before I make a decision. So it's not, I don't want to be on a board where all we do is fight with each other.
I don't think this board has that reputation.
Not at all.
No.
But I do like to see a little more dialogue about what do you think, what do I think, you know. I mean, you need to be a team.
Public hearings galore, is that what you're thinking?
No, but even in a regular committee meeting, the best committee meetings I go to are where you have a diverse group of people. You know, you have long-term residents, short-term residents, you have teachers, you have parents, you have people that don't have children, you know, you need all those things.
Yeah.
But you need to know what each one of them is thinking on a big issue. So like the middle school, you know, what is everybody thinking and why?
Well, maybe you need more information also. I mean, somebody's feeding you information, I assume.
Well, I think that's something, if I was on the committee, I would want the information early. Because if you get it shortly, and I don't know if that's happening or not, it probably is, but you need it early enough where you can really think about it. So the kindergarten issue, that's something you need time to talk about. It can't be just when you're voting on the budget. You need to have meetings before that.
Well, so it was voted on, it was really discussed 2 years ago at the annual town meeting. I don't know if you were there. It was a very comprehensive conversation, I thought. Yeah,
and that's what you need. And I'm not saying it's not happening, I'm just saying that's what you need. You need dialogue.
Okay, one more question. The charter. You were here, you were maybe not here when we voted on the charter. Maybe you were here when we voted on the charter.
What year was the charter voted on?
Boy, that's so bad.
I was here 2004 to 2010.
No, it was 2000. I think it was before. I'm not even sure what year it was. I should know, but I think it's been about 10 years since we've had the charter, maybe 8.
So we would have been here then,
we
probably.
Would have remembered maybe if you voted on the charter. What do you think?
I was here for the high school project, I remember that.
Yeah, okay. So how do you, from a school committee perspective, look at that and feel about it?
I'm not sure that, I guess the question is that issue really about the charter? Or is it about personalities? And,
oh, okay.
You know, I don't...
is what issue?
Well, what issue are you referring to?
The charter. I mean, people look at the charter. I've talked to different candidates about it, and some people, you know, obviously focus on the strong town manager. Some people focus on the open town meeting form of government.
Yeah.
Some people focus on the relationship between the schools and the town manager.
Yeah, I mean, the charter is not, between the school and the town, I mean, that's pretty much dictated by state law. I mean, they're not, the budget's the way, it's set up the way it is because of state law. The charter, I've heard, my involvement with the charter has really been what I've heard from people about whether they like it or they don't like it.
Right.
And really a lot of that has revolved around, you know, the town administrator and the board and how they think it's working.
And that's really not your issue. I'm not trying to make it yours. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So I haven't really thought about that.
So in terms of a school committee person, or hoping to be a school committee person, this isn't something that's, oh boy, I've got a red flag.
No, I think that's more a town board of selectmen.
Well, there were issues when the grounds were sort of put under the auspices of DPW and athletic fields. And there were some issues with it where the school became a little vocal, but that's worked out. It seems to have worked out.
And that comes up everywhere, regardless of your charter. I have that come up all the time.
Yeah, well,
people are wondering.
I understand that, but I think a lot of residents think the charter's the charter, kind of thing. Great. So what message would you want to give the audience in terms of why they should vote for you?
Well, I think I can give a different perspective. It may not be a better perspective, but it's certainly different. You know, I have a different life experience than some of the other people on the board. And they have very good perspectives, I think. You know, you have probably 3 teachers on the board, or ex-teachers. You have people without kids.
Once upon a time teachers.
You have people with kids. So, but mine's, you know, it's just I do something for a living that might be helpful to the school system. I can't give legal advice to the committee, and I certainly would never want to, and I don't, you know, I moved here because I don't represent the school partially, and so that's important to me. I don't want to have, you know, I wouldn't work for the schools, regardless of the school committee. I would never be their attorney while my kids are in the school.
Oh, interesting.
So for me, I think I can give a different perspective, and I'm also somebody that really tries to work through problems without, you know, I try to do it in an amicable way, in a respectful way. You know, that's my goal. And I think if you have the dialogue, you can come up with better solutions. If I know exactly what everybody else in the room is thinking.
One more quick question. Turf fields, that will come up if it hasn't already.
Yeah, I know there's a whole bunch of issues with the grass at the moment.
What,
But
do you have any
Well,
feeling about that, or?
that's something where
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just
Yeah, no,
I mean, some people say,
it's-
"Oh, yes," or "You
No,
know,"
I don't.
or you know.
for me, things like that always come down to what else am I losing to do it. So if you can do something like that and not lose something else that
Well,
is
apparently,
important
private money is what I'm hearing.
for the whole project.
Well, I think maybe they may try to get some community preservation money. How much that can do or not do legally, I don't know as we speak. But
So the last
I
time,
think the more the issue is maintenance, restrictions, and
well, there's also
do we
some
want it?
questions about health, I
Yeah,
guess,
that's
which
right.
I think might have been
oh yeah, I mean, I think there's different kinds of turf.
because of the chemicals and everything.
Mhm.
But
So it's not one of your
it's
issues.
not something. I mean, those things are always. School committees deal with everything under the sun. For me, the most important thing is really the education we're providing to the kids is the most important thing to me. Everything else you have to deal with as a school committee, but my focus would be that. I mean, it's important, and that's how my own life experience and how I got to where I am and how my father did, and it's always been the most important thing to me. I think.
What's the most important element of education? Is it class size? Is it money? Is it the building? Is it the teacher?
I think it's giving kids what they need to be as successful as they can, which class sizes, unless they're really large, class sizes is not necessarily the #1 factor when you look at studies. What's really important is the quality of the staff you have in front of you, how respected they feel, and how free they are to make decisions about how to present the curriculum. I mean, the best schools, when you look at the best performing schools, they're always wealthy because they have all those extra things that you can do for your own kids. But it's also, they kind of work as a team. So you're all free to kind of make decisions that might work, might not work, and you try to find the best thing possible to move forward. Those are the best schools, really. And where parents are involved, which they are in Longmeadow.
So we can't fail then.
If Longmeadow was ever failing, there'd be a real problem. I mean, it would be, I think that what we need to do is just make sure that with all the resources we have, we use them in a way that's effective to do the very best we can. And we have the resources to do that.
Yeah, limited resources.
Yeah,
I mean,
but much better
compared
than
to many communities.
this area. You're the only one. Longmeadow is the only one that compares to Eastern Mass from a financial score perspective. I mean, it is the only one. I mean, I looked all over the state before we moved back here, and
So it's a pretty good school system.
it's very good.
Very good school system. Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your candidacy, June 9th.
Yes.
And
thank
the
you.
polls are open from 8 until 8
I think
at the
it's 8 to
community
8.
house.
Yes,
And you'll be out there holding a sign, I assume.
I will be.
And thank you to our audience, and please remember to vote on June 9th for the candidate of your choice. Good evening.